In 2007, Craftsman was named America's most trusted brand. Fathers handed these tools down to their sons like family heirlooms. The lifetime warranty was so legendary that scavengers used to dig broken wrenches out of the trash, walk into Sears, and walk out with brand new replacements they could sell for cash. These tools were practically currency, but today, the Craftsman name is on tools made in China and India that professional mechanics refuse to touch. The warranty is nearly impossible to use, and the American factory that was supposed to save the brand was quietly shut down before it ever produced a single wrench at scale. We are going to expose exactly how a hedge fund billionaire, a $900 million deal, and two corporate owners systematically destroyed the most iconic tool brand in American history. And we are going to show you the three brands that are building the tools Craftsman no longer will. If you walk into a Lowe's or an Ace Hardware today, you will see the familiar red and black Craftsman logo, and you might assume you are buying the same tools your grandfather trusted for 50 years. You might believe that Stanley Black Decker, the world's largest toolmaker, is pouring resources into making Craftsman great again. That is exactly what they want you to believe. The reality is that the Craftsman brand has been passed around like a poker chip between corporations that cared about extracting every last dollar of value from a name that took 90 years to build. At its peak, Craftsman tools were in more American garages and workshops than any other brand on the planet. It was the default choice for everyone from weekend hobbyists to professional contractors. To understand how we got here, you have to understand something most people never learn. Sears never built a single Craftsman tool, not one. From the day the brand launched in 1927, every wrench, every socket, every screwdriver was actually manufactured by a network of specialized American companies that most consumers never heard of. A company called Western Forge in Colorado Springs made the screwdrivers. Moore Drop Forging made wrenches. Danaher made the sockets and ratchets. Sears would set the specifications, these craftsmen would forge the steel, and then Sears would stamp the Craftsman name on the finished product. The system worked beautifully for over 80 years because Sears demanded quality from their suppliers, and those suppliers employed thousands of skilled American workers. But then a hedge fund manager from Connecticut decided that Sears was worth more dead than alive. And that is where the destruction of Craftsman truly begins. In 2005, a billionaire named Eddie Lampert used his hedge fund, ESL Investments, to merge Kmart and Sears into a company called Sears Holdings. Lampert was not a retailer. He was a Wall Street financier who had made his fortune spotting undervalued assets. And the assets he spotted at Sears were not the stores or the customers. They were the real estate, the brand names, and the pension fund. Over the next 13 years, Lampert systematically stripped Sears of everything valuable. He spun off 235 of the most profitable store properties into a real estate investment trust that his own hedge fund controlled a 43% stake in. Then Sears had to pay rent to occupy the very buildings it used to own. Stores that had been profitable for decades were suddenly hemorrhaging cash just to keep the lights on. He sold off Land's End. He sold off the Die Hard battery brand. He spun off Sears hometown and outlet stores as a separate company. Each sale raised cash that was used to service debt and enrich shareholders, while the actual retail operations rotted from the inside. The Washington Post described Sears under Lampert as a hedge fund disguised as a retailer. Money that should have gone into store maintenance was being diverted into financial engineering. Former employees described stores with buckets, catching rainwater and broken escalators that nobody bothered to fix. But Lampert was not fixing the stores because the stores were not the product. The brands were the product, and the most valuable brand of all was Craftsman. Even as Sears was bleeding customers, the Craftsman name still carried enormous trust with the American public. So when Sears needed cash to stay alive, they did the unthinkable. In January 2017, Sears announced it was selling the Craftsman brand to Stanley Black Decker for $900 million. The proceeds went straight to paying off debt, including debt that was owed to Lampert himself. Less than 2 years later, Sears filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. A lawsuit later alleged that Lampert had transferred more than $2 billion of the company's assets to himself and his shareholders. Sears, the company that once employed 350,000 people, and operated more than 3,000 stores, was reduced to a paper entity stuck in bankruptcy court. But the damage to Craftsman had started long before the sale. Here is what most people do not realize. The destruction of Craftsman quality did not begin with Stanley Black Decker. It began under Sears around 2009 and 2010, when the company started offshoring tool production to save money. The sockets and wrenches that had been forged in American factories for decades were quietly moved to Chinese and Taiwanese production lines through Apex Tool Group. The screwdrivers and pliers that Western Forge had been making in Colorado Springs since 1966 were next. Workers who had spent their entire careers at these factories found out their jobs were disappearing, not because the tools were selling poorly, but because the parent company needed to cut costs to fund its own financial engineering. When Sears sold the Craftsman brand, it cut off Western Forge's largest customer overnight. The CEO of Western Forge's parent company said publicly that they could not survive the impact of the Craftsman move. In February 2020, the factory that had produced over 1 billion screwdrivers closed permanently, laying off all 164 remaining employees. That factory was not killed by foreign competition. It was killed by the company it had served for over 50 years. And the ripple effects went even further. When Sears collapsed, it did not just destroy one factory. It destabilized an entire ecosystem of small American toolmakers that had depended on Craftsman volume to keep their workers employed. SPG International, which made toolboxes, closed. Vaughan, which made hammers in the United States since 1869, ran into severe trouble. The Armstrong brand was shut down entirely. Decades of American manufacturing expertise evaporated. But here is where the story takes its cruelest turn, because when the new owners bought Craftsman, they launched one of the most aggressive marketing campaigns in tool industry history. They told the American public they were going to fix everything. The CEO at the time, Jim Loree, admitted publicly that the tools had been left to devolve. He said they had migrated from made in America to virtually everything being made in China and Mexico. They were in sad shape. So the company made a bold announcement, a $90 million commitment to a brand new factory in Fort Worth, Texas. The plan was to bring Craftsman wrench, ratchet, and socket production back to American soil using state-of-the-art robotic forging equipment. 500 American jobs would be created. The marketing campaign was everywhere. Made in America with global materials, press conferences, investor presentations, and news coverage everywhere. The new Craftsman was going to be different, except it was not different at all. The Fort Worth factory was plagued with problems from the start. They purchased nearly $5 million in forging press equipment from Ajax, the largest forging equipment supplier in North America. According to court documents, the specifications for the equipment were wrong. Both companies ended up suing each other for breach of contract. In March 2023, before any tools made it to store shelves at meaningful volume, the factory was shut down. The workers who had been hired to rebuild American Craftsman manufacturing were let go. The project that had been marketed as the rebirth of American Craftsman manufacturing died in a legal dispute over forging presses, and it gets worse. At the same time the Fort Worth factory was failing, Stanley Black Decker was drowning in a financial crisis of its own making. It had overproduced during the pandemic boom and was sitting on nearly $6 billion in excess inventory. Profits dropped by 80% in a single quarter. The stock price cratered. Leadership announced a $2 billion cost-cutting program that would close at least 30% of its 120 manufacturing facilities worldwide. Factories in Cheraw, South Carolina, and Fort Mill, South Carolina were shut down. Thousands of workers were laid off. The corporation that was supposed to save Craftsman was fighting for its own survival and cutting the very investments it had sworn to make. So where does that leave the brand today? Walk into Lowe's right now and pick up a Craftsman wrench. Turn it over. You will likely see "Made in India" or "Made in China" stamped on the back. The iconic raised panel wrenches that your grandfather used are now produced overseas with no connection to the craftsmen who originally built them. In 2025, the V-Series was discontinued, widely considered the best hand tool line Craftsman had offered in years. It was based on high-quality French Facom designs, but the company phased it out in favor of cheaper alternatives. Quality perception data from YouGov shows that Craftsman's quality score dropped 6 points since 2014, the largest decline of any major tool brand. Purchase consideration fell from 57% to 47%. On tool forums, mechanics have taken to calling the brand Craftsman. One professional fleet mechanic said he does not give the tools a second look anymore. He walks right past the Lowe's tool department because even the old Chinese-made tools from Sears were better than what is on the shelves today. And the warranty, the famous lifetime guarantee that defined the brand for generations, has become a shadow of itself. You used to walk into any Sears with a broken tool and walk out with a new one. No receipt, no questions. Today, you get bounced between store associates and a customer service hotline, and people have reported being offered a lower grade replacement for a tool that carried a lifetime guarantee. But if you work with your hands and you refuse to accept overpriced junk, there are three paths forward. The first is to buy vintage. The smartest tool buyers in America right now are hunting for pre-2010 Craftsman tools with the USA stamp on the steel. These tools were forged by the same American companies that made Craftsman legendary, and they are functionally indestructible. You can find them at estate sales, flea markets, and online auctions. A set of USA-made sockets from the 1990s will outperform anything new at Lowe's today. And because they are no longer in production, they are actually appreciating in value. The second path is to discover the small companies filling the vacuum. Tecton, based in Michigan, has steadily become what Craftsman should have been. Over 20% of their catalog is now made in the United States, with most of the rest coming from Taiwan, not China. Their warranty process is the opposite of the Craftsman nightmare. You email a photo and a replacement ships within 24 hours. Then there is Wright Tool in Barberton, Ohio, making professional-grade hand tools in America since 1927, the same year Craftsman was born. For pliers, there is Knipex from Germany and Channel Lock from Meadville, Pennsylvania. American-made since 1886. These companies survived because they refused to chase the offshore race to the bottom. The third path is the most radical. Stop buying from any corporation that treats a brand like a stock ticker. Check the country of origin stamp on every tool before it goes in your cart. Craftsman, once the most trusted name in American tools, was dismantled not by foreign competition, but by its own stewards. Nearly a century of trust gone. 164 workers in Colorado Springs who spent their careers forging screwdrivers to the highest standard, out of a job. A factory in Texas shuttered before it ever delivered on its word. And right now, somewhere in America, a young person is walking into Lowe's and buying their first set of Craftsman tools, believing they are getting the same quality their grandparents swore by. They are not, and nobody is going to tell them the truth. But now you know. Check the steel, check the stamp, check who owns the name, and never pay a premium for a brand that stopped earning it a long time ago. If you found this story valuable, hit subscribe so we can keep exposing the companies profiting from your trust.